Okay, you're live.
Okay, welcome everybody. We're starting a little bit late. We just have a little earthquake here. Teeny tiny, so we weren't sure if we should stay here or not, but here we are live. For those of you who are just coming in, this is the April Policy and Personnel Committee meeting. For those of you who like to follow us along, there was no March meeting, so if you can't find it online, that means it doesn't exist, it didn't happen. We had to cancel it until today. So, I'm Deborah Bush, your chairperson. With me are members of the committee, Nana Malkonian, Rachel Gilliard, we have Dr. Shields, our liaison, Kavi, who works in central office, and our special guest today is Ms. Manuel and Jessica Mack. So, Dr. Shields.
Good morning, everyone. All right, so we did not have a meeting last month, as you mentioned, but the minutes that you have in the packet are from February, and those were already approved and adopted by the Board of Education. As a personnel update, I just want to let you know we have posted the vacancy for the assistant principalship at the high school. So we will see what that yields in applicants.
And that was because of a retirement.
Because of a retirement, yes. And we're beginning to post positions in the teaching area for those positions that are not impacted by the budget. So for example, we have a science position at the high school, in addition to a Spanish position at the high school. So those types of positions, our routines in the spring, we advertise for them and then hire for those positions.
And when you say not impacted by the budget, they're teaching positions, the ones under the current thinking in scenario one was either due to retirement or attrition.
Correct. Yep. So 1.3 is policy 6240.
Oh, sorry, I just mentioned.
Yes, can I interject? I wasn't sure you were done, so I was waiting. We're moving into hiring season, and I was hoping that we could maybe just hear from you for our benefit as board members and for the community to maybe understand a little bit the varied approaches we have to hiring in the district and what that process looks like.
Sure.
And as well, I know you attended 2 diversity fairs, so I actually had it highlighted in my agenda notes to ask how that went.
So why don't I touch on that first, because that would lead nicely into your question, right? I went to 2 diversity fairs. One was hosted by Nassau Boasties, the other one was hosted by the Jericho School District. And at those fairs, we are there with several other administrators from other districts, meeting and greeting applicants for the positions that we believe we will have open for this coming school year. The first one of the meetings I had Dr. Pernick with me, and at another meeting I had Casey Lomangino with me. It's just nice to have another set of hands there because sometimes the table gets very busy with applicants coming to meet with you and to say hello. So we received a lot of resumes from those 2 experiences, and now I've passed those resumes on to the administrators who potentially will be able to hire in those areas. So to answer your question about, or to give a little insight into how the hiring process works. So we advertise for a position. We advertise internally is one level of advertising, and then we advertise externally as well. So on OLAS is one of the platforms that we use for advertising for teacher vacancies and administrator vacancies. We also advertise on something called Schoolfront for non-instructional positions as well. So then when we receive those resumes, we then have the people that are closest to that point of hire do the hire. So I'll give a teacher position. So if there's an elementary position at Salem, for example, Dr. Ferrante would lead the hiring process in meeting the applicants for an elementary classroom position. So then screen those applicants and then recommend a short list of people onto a teacher committee. The teacher committee will then sit down and interview those finalists and make recommendation to the principal on who they think is the strongest applicant.
Is that teacher committee isolated in Salem?
So the teacher
In your
committee
example.
in my example is made up of teachers from Salem.
Okay.
If it were for a classroom position, right? If it was a music position, for example, which we consider more of a district-wide position, might have some music teachers from other schools and other levels meeting those applicants as well. Because we see that sometimes a music teacher that we hire at an elementary school might end up working at the high school someday soon. So we like to have a more broad view of getting to know that applicant. So then they make a recommendation on who they think is the strongest applicant, and that's advisory from the teacher committee to the administration. From there, they have a discussion about who to recommend for a demonstration lesson. Demonstration lesson is where a teacher comes in and teaches on a specific topic to an audience of kids. And then then there's a debrief after that with the applicant. How do you think that lesson went? Do you think there's anything you would change in that lesson? If you were to teach it again, for example.
Excuse me, so when you say with kids, you mean important kids?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why we try and do most of our hiring before the end of June, right? And in the summer, we can sometimes find summer schools, or we can find camps that we host, for example, at Manor Haven, where we have an audience of kids where we can teach a topic. Then, based on the demonstration lessons of the finalists, there's a reconvening of the teacher leadership in that building that is on the committee with the administration. And they talk about who do they think they'd recommend to the assistant superintendent in my office. And then I meet the person. And while we're doing that, we're also having them do a writing sample. We're getting references from them. We're checking their certifications to make sure they're qualified for the positions they've applied for. We're doing background checks for fingerprints, things like that. And then that leads to an interview with me. And then I will then debrief with the principal or the director who recommended the person and decide if this is a candidate we want to move forward for offering them the job and recommendation to the board for hiring. So that gives a little insight from beginning to end, all the intricacies of the process. And then we communicate back to the finalists whether they've been moving forward, or whether they're going to move forward in the position or not for hiring.
Are the students who were there for the practice lesson also debriefed and asked what they thought, or is it just the adults observing?
For the most part, it's the adults observing, but I will share with you, having been a principal here in the district, I would sometimes check in with the kids before I exited the room. What did you learn during that lesson?
Mm-hmm.
What did you enjoy most about that lesson? And get feedback from them more informally. We won't have the whole class debrief, but I find spot checking with kids gives me a little insight into what I was thinking. Did it connect with what the kids were thinking as well?
Do you know if all the principals do this?
I think it's a pretty common practice to gauge how are the kids responding to that teacher. And sometimes that involves a little one-on-one conversation before you go. You also sense an energy in the room too. You know, some teachers really bring a great energy to the room, and you feel that pulse. So that's telling, and that's exciting to see. Yeah. So it's a thorough process, and in the end, when we get to that final decision, the teacher, is making a commitment to us as well as us making a commitment to them. So it really has to be a fit in both directions. So the feedback I get from applicants is they feel it's a very professional process. They feel valued and they feel heard.
When you describe fit for the staff coming in and so that they want to feel like they fit and we want to feel like they fit, what does that imply?
So there's a lot of deep questioning that's going on by the leadership of the school and also by central office, to see. We're looking for skills in the area of instruction as one domain that's important to us, right? But we're also looking for how are they going to be collaborating with colleagues? How are they going to connect with our kids? How are they going to see the importance of reaching out to families and making sure that they know that they're accessible and they know their kid really well? It's really important that they are going to give to our community in ways beyond just delivering instruction. So I'm sometimes asking them, if you, other than teaching, what might you do for our school district? So they might say, no, I'm really interested in running a newspaper, or I'd really like to coach at the high school level, even though I'm an elementary school teacher. You think there's options. I want to be able to get involved in the local theater productions that are going on. Do you think there's a place for me in that? Because you notice I have a dance background as well as being a science teacher, for example. So we're really looking at how are they going to contribute globally, not just to the classroom of kids that they're in front of. And, are they going to hear all kids' voices? Are they really going to feel connected to every kid in the room? So it's really getting to know them, and there's a lot of conversation back and forth. And investing in the process. Because they're here for a good while, we hope, if they're really good at what they do.
Well, you read my
Thank
mind
you.
with your question, so I don't have any more questions.
Thank you. So that's the teacher piece, and then, of course, there's the administrator piece. So
Of
what
course.
does that look like?
Yeah, so administrators are hired in different ways depending on the level that they're going to be performing at. So for example, an assistant principal would go through a similar process at the building level by the building administration. So we'll do all the advertising, the building principal will lead the screening, lead the interviewing, and engage with the teacher committee. It doesn't really involve like a demonstration lesson. But it involves more like getting to know people in the building. Then they'll make a recommendation to me. But when it comes to like a district level position, like a principal, like a director, we will do the screening at the central office level. So I'll do that screening typically with another assistant superintendent, depending on what the title is for. And then I'll be updating the superintendent along the way during that process. And then we'll convene our 3 different committees that many people in this room have sat on, where we have a teacher committee, we have an administrator committee, and we have a parent committee. And we will then share finalists that we would be happy to hire, potentially, with those committees. And then get feedback after those committees, meet with the candidates, and they spend about 45 minutes to an hour. We'll get feedback through a debriefing with the superintendent, myself, and the other central office administrator that was involved in the process. Then, after we get that feedback from the 3 constituent groups, the central office team will meet to decide, is there someone here that we feel we should move forward to the board level? And then we make a recommendation to the board and have a dialogue with the board about what we think the pros and cons are of each of the finalists. And the board gets to meet the person, as you know, before they're appointed.
Is there any engagement with students for an administrator?
So I think it's important that we're seeing them. So for example, walking them around the building, how do they engage with kids as they're walking through the cafeteria? How do they engage, if they're going to an outdoor event like recess, for example, how are they engaging? Are they just engaging with the adults, or are they engaging with kids as well? So we do not have like a formal demonstration lesson like with teachers, but we do want to see them in those less formal situations with how they respond to kids.
Okay.
And typically administrators who come to us, they've spent a lot of time as a teacher or a psychologist or a social worker, so they hopefully have a long history of good interactions with kids, because that is critical, you're right.
So let's go to the fit question. How, again, it has to be a fit. So what are we looking for? What are we making? We're hoping that is a fit for the person coming here.
Yeah, so I think we really are investing in our administrators, and we want to make sure they feel like there's an opportunity, not just in this position that they're looking for, but whatever they aspire to maybe in the next position. Because those relationships that we're going to have as an administrative unit are important. We want to help them feel like they're going to grow in the position they're in, and we're going to support them if there's an interest in a different position eventually later on, after they grow through this position. So that's a lot of back and forth, of understanding what do they value, And are they gonna fit into the value system that we have here in Port Washington, looking for the interests of the whole child? And really trying to be there to support every kid in what their aspirations are in our school system. So that takes, finding the right qualities in a person that are really gonna complement what our mission is here.
It's a long-term commitment for teachers and administrators.
Yeah, we're
So
really
it
investing
needs to
in the
be-
community and the people that are coming to serve it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sure.
Okay, moving on to policy.
I know that was time consuming, but I think it was valuable.
Of course, absolutely. So policy 6240. Ms. Manuel, this, I understand this is just to be reviewed annually?
Yeah.
And I don't believe there are any changes, correct?
No, the ones in blue, that's just
Those are just formatting type questions that we anticipate that members of our trustee group here will recommend to us as we move forward, yeah. So there's no content changes.
No
just,
content, and there was no content change recommended by Ms. Bezos.
Right.
Or any of your organizations, so this is just annual review. Any questions about this? I know that in the past couple of years, when the treasury notes started to increase in value, the board interjected itself and said, is there something like this that we could consider? And I think you looked into that, trying to make the most of our
right.
Our money.
Actually, I believe it was last year, we opened up an account with County Class. And the interest rates have been very competitive. And the nice thing about NICLAS is they come to us with competitive rates. There's some other organizations that you have to actually ask them, well, this looks lower. So our treasurer looks at our balances and tries to make sure we can invest.
Are there any questions about this? No? Okay, I don't see a need to put on for a first read with the minor edits that were made, because those were really just spelling out numbers. Right, is everybody okay with that? Since there was no substance? Okay, so then we'll just mark this as reviewed for the annual requirement. Okay.
The online banking services policy, 6420, is a new policy. And that was brought to our attention because the auditor recommended that we have one.
Yes, that's correct. So this policy really speaks to some of the things we're already doing. It just clarifies how it should be done and really the controls that should be put in place. So the treasurer will go in and she'll set up payments. And then I also have like a key fob to go on and approve what she's transferring. There's certain things that require dual approval, and then there's certain ones, if they're between the same accounts, like basically, not the same accounts, but our account to account, that doesn't need approval because we have templates that she can only do certain transfers. So like the main thing we need to consider is, can the funds be moved somewhere we don't want them to be? And that doesn't exist. There was also something about making ACH payments to vendors instead of sending a physical check. So that's something that the auditor would still be looking at, but it helps us to pay people faster, which people appreciate.
I see that there are 2 NISPA samples, and there are samples also from Great Neck and Roslyn. The one for Port Washington is a synthesis of what?
That's correct. Well, it's really, the NISBA is the predominant one, and then the specifics are really what we thought were important for our district with the offsetting controls of the transfers. So Jessica can also go in and approve something if I'm not available to approve it. So there would never be an instance where just one person is going in and having the authority to transfer.
Is this something we need to run by the internal auditor? Or they said they wanted us to have a policy.
They recommend it.
They recommended, even though we already had the internal workings of it, it just wasn't written in policy. Is this something they should view before we adopt it as a board?
I
Or do
think,
you feel that because NISBA gave the template and this has become standard through the
Yes,
school
I
board
think
association,
that-
we're okay?
that this could go to the board as it is. We may want our attorney to just review it to make sure, like with all our policies, I'm sure he reviews them.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, can we share this with our school district attorney?
Of course.
And if there is no issue with it, we can put it on for a first read. I would say, well, our next meeting is in a week and a half, so maybe in May.
Yeah, as soon as Mr. Miller's looked at it, we'll put it on for first reading.
Everybody okay with that?
And I think if it happens to happen faster and can be on, there's a reason to wait, but
I
there's
just
also
didn't
no
want to
rush.
put, right, I
Yeah,
just
you
didn't want to
wanna
put
pressure
him
on.
under the gun, right?
Yeah,
Or, whatever the phrase is. Yes, okay.
All right. So, 6,700, purchasing, this is a new policy. We had regulations and we had exhibits in place.
But no policy.
But we didn't have a policy, and we thought it was important that we have a policy to complement them. And it is a required policy as well, so it's all in place already, but we wanted to complement with a policy.
Okay, and this is NISBA's template, basically, anything that you wanted to add, change is in there. Is there anything that you would like to highlight for us as a committee that you think is important, or this really is just a codification of what you're already doing?
Right, this is, and Jessica is our purchasing agent, so Jessica has thoroughly reviewed this as well. And we've made sure that it coincides with our regulations that are set forth. And it's also, Jessica and her staff are educating the building level staff as well about the purchasing policies and everything being followed. So the district has come quite a ways, right, in the last few years about it.
We have office hours for purchasing so that people can ask questions and we can give them information on things, like let's say people making the same mistakes, share that during the purchasing hour so we can improve our
And
procedures.
those are weekly, right?
They were weekly before budget started, I need to bring them back up.
And that was internal mostly with regulation, as opposed to the board's policy. Whatever was happening was an internal
These are procedures.
procedures and practices. Because we heavily revised 6700R, was
Yes.
it last year?
Yeah.
My brain fog is, but it was last year, yeah, I remember those various discussions we had about who should have authority to do what.
Yes.
We actually, the board, or the committee and the board constrained you and the superintendent in some of the things that where we wanted constraints, we added those guardrails, right?
And that's our responsibility to communicate that to the building and all the clerical staff, because they are the ones who are charged with placing the purchase orders. And so from there, it kind of goes to the teachers and other employees about if you want to purchase a book or class supplies, what's the proper way to do that?
Any questions from the committee?
it's fine. I mean, it seems to me that we really kind of already discussed the meat of this last year in depth. But of course, you're right, like we should have an actual policy, so that's good.
That's one of those things where you look at it 100 times, because I've been on this committee so many times already, and when you see it,
It seems
it seems like it's obvious, right? And your eye just skips right over it.
Yep.
Which is, good to have another set of eyes. Mea culpa. We should run this by council as well.
Okay.
In conjunction with the other. For first read. Does your business association, your umbrella association, have a purchasing policy, or do they follow NISBA?
They typically are consulted by NISBA for the policy.
Oh, so NISBA gets their marching orders.
Well, I wouldn't say marching orders, no, it's kind of like the,
Symbiotic relationship?
yeah, because we are the business people, NISBA, they have a very good relationship, so they'll share.
So there's been
best
input.
practice. Yes.
Awesome. Okay,
So the business office also reviewed the regulations and the exhibits. And I don't believe there were any changes, were there? As you know, just bringing them back to your annual.
yes,
presentation.
yes, and we did extensive work for it last year. Doesn't mean that we couldn't change it this year, but it didn't. It really went through a lot of discussion this year. Okay, good.
So 6710 is a new policy, purchasing.
And this is a purchasing authority. So this specifically names Jessica Mack as the purchasing agent. So the purchasing agent in the school district is the only person who's authorized to approve expenditures, and that's really for the board. She's acting as a board-appointed position. So purchase order should be in place prior to any expenditure being done. And I think last year we did discuss if ever a purchase is made without a purchase order being in place, they're receiving a notice that they're in violation of the purchasing policy. So that has helped us communicate to all of our employees that Jessica is the person that has to first approve it and make sure the funds are available for that purchase. So it's taken a while to educate people on stuff, but it's really made a lot of difference.
That's great. Now, I actually went to the law because I was uncomfortable with including Ms. Mack's name in the policy, but the law says we have to include her name. And I wasn't uncomfortable including it because I'm afraid to say Ms. Mack's name in public. But if there's turnover, we as a board have to remember, right, to change it.
And we've intentionally removed all of the other names and left it as simply the title of
The title, right.
And then usually in the report, you state the name.
Yes,
Right.
but the law literally says
In the policy.
that we have to put it in the policy. And so, here we
It's
are.
actually very strange.
Very
It's
strange.
Very different from the way we handle everything else, because I had the same initial reaction, and the same deep dive at what's going on here, but this note, I think in this policy tells you, I don't think they're anticipating, like, part of the problem is it's onerous to edit policies, right? So we never want to put this kind of stuff in stone. But I think NISBA appears like they're contemplating that changing the name won't be a substantive change, and that we would simply change it but not put it through the whole approval process. I don't know if anybody knows, but I think that's implied by their note, because otherwise it seems like you could have a 2 to 3 month period of time if somebody leaves where you don't have a purchasing agent that's really in the policy.
Right, but you do have a deputy purchasing agent.
Deputy, yeah.
So that person could step in.
And it's also stated in reorg, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
So at least we're covered there, as long as, that person is in place by the reorg meeting, of course.
So now I'm wondering, and not to get so micro-technical in here, the policy, by following the letter of the law, literally designates Jessica Mack as the purchasing agent. Should we put something in there that says, in the event that, something to cover the deputy
So
position?
it does say,
Does
if
it?
the individual suddenly becomes unable
Oh, thank you,
to
okay.
fulfill the duties, the board will designate another purchasing agent at the next board meeting. And I believe at the reorg, we do designate the deputy purchasing agent,
Okay.
so you're covered.
Okay, because I was trying to get, before we have to designate another purchasing agent, I was talking about the deputy.
Mhm.
In other words, if Jessica if Ms. Mack is unable to act, the deputy steps in.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, you're saying
Before we
should
have to
say
get
that?
to the formality, yes. Before, since it's covered in reorg, right, do you know what I'm saying? This
Yeah,
makes
why
it
is
almost
it in the policy?
Yes, this almost makes it as though it's Jessica Mack or nobody.
Mhm.
And so that was my concern, before we, because sometimes we don't have meetings every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So
So perhaps you could change the board will designate another purchasing agent. You could perhaps say, if she becomes unable to fulfill the duties during the course of the year, the deputy purchasing agent may assume.
And we
these
can name her
responsibilities.
too,
Right,
if we have the person.
does that make sense?
I understand, yes.
Yeah.
It does. Maybe we give this to district council, to school council, just to make sure, I know how I would want to say it, but as a lawyer, but better to let the school district attorney cover that, given the specificity in the law.
I mean, I think it also would be good to understand why that's not in this sample, because I think it's a very practical suggestion.
Yes.
Obviously, it should be in this sample. Is there a reason it's not?
Yes. Yes, especially given there's a
Sometimes it's
deputy.
oversight too, because I know a lot of districts are like, what,
Mhm.
if somebody goes, breaks their wrist and stuff.
Yes. A lot of laws have oversights
Yes.
and unintended negative consequences and so forth and so on. Okay,
All right, we will do that.
great. So this goes to Howard. And then should we bring it back here for the committee to approve the language? Or can we just put it on for a first read? I'm in favor of first reading, but, all
All your-
Yeah, I think the first
Yeah, I
read
think
is
it's fine.
Okay.
manageable.
right. First read is public and nothing hidden, no subterfuge, no nothing, right? Not that we're,
And as always, after first read, you can throw it back here if there's any questions.
for more fun.
So 1.8 on the agenda is the regulation and then the exhibit regarding the public use of school facilities. So just to refresh people's memories who may not have been at the past meetings when we discussed this topic, we adopted a policy or revised a policy. And the ask of the committee was, could you please update the regulation and exhibit and bring it back to us?
Yes.
So,
And that was after the various meetings and the audit and, yes.
so Brian Graham, in his office, you remember he was here presenting to us. And did a very nice job in telling us the ins and outs of his office dealing with this issue of facility use. So he has made some recommendations as to how to rewrite the regulation. And what he's also given the committee is a proposed schedule of fees for next year. So I just want to bring that to your attention, that it says on the top of it, proposed 23, 24, but it's really 24, 25.
This,
No, this blue,
oh,
yeah, you'll see the blue and white column chart.
okay, because the date needs to be changed on this one.
So that is the actual one that we're currently operating
Under
under,
reorg.
Oh,
Yeah.
This is what we,
which you approved under reorg, which is the 23, 24. And that's why I gave that to you just now, because we wanted you to be able to see what we're living under now versus the changes that are being recommended.
this is really for the budget committee.
So right, this isn't something I need to
Right,
act
this is-
on now, but you asked that we bring it back
Yes,
to
yes.
this committee.
yes, because we had discussed the fact, when we were at a joint work session, it wasn't policy, but policy and budget, that we learned that the district was not breaking even, forget about making a profit, wasn't even breaking even from the facilities use, and the board said that's untenable, that has to stop. And so that's what this is.
Yep.
And so these recommendations will then be put to the board for approval the full board for approval in reorg, as it's done every year.
Correct. Yeah, we're not looking for any action by this committee right now. It's really just as a point of information to bring back to you. So Manuel, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Sure, so Mr. Graham did want to be here, but he's at a couple of the buildings with the architect, and also meeting with Officer Tony, so we apologize for not being here. The policy reflects all of his concerns. One of them, and a step I've asked him to take, is meeting with the groups or the organizations prior to them actually having the event and giving them an estimate of what the cost will be, so they realize we do have security, we do have custodians. We have like summer programs where sometimes they'll use our supply of paper towels and tissues and everything. So they need to understand that there's certain things that we do not supply. So I think that will help really the communication back and forth.
So the security fee was something that had been discussed as an addition. So in looking under fees, I understand the statement, additional custodial fees will be charged if cleaning of the facility is beyond normal conditions. What does beyond normal conditions mean? Because if I were to walk into an elementary school cafeteria after lunch, I would think it looked like a disaster area, but that may be a normal condition, a normal state of affair in elementary school. So what does this mean?
I think he would have to, specifically say that, there are certain things that you would expect after a dance or something, like, yes, we'll sweep up the floors. But if there's stuff on the walls or things that aren't normal cleanup, that might require additional time by the custodians. That would be something.
I just because we want to welcome our partner and community organizations into our schools. We don't want to do it at a detriment to our schools, right? Especially in our newly renovated spaces, like the Schreiber Auditorium. Well, now it's been a while, but we also don't want to create confusion or undue anxiety or concern. We want to have transparency and, what's the word I'm thinking of? Upfront, we want them, expectations,
Yeah.
reasonable expectations. So that's why sometimes when I read through these things, I say, okay, what does that mean?
So I'll speak with him about that, and maybe at the when he's giving them the estimate of what the cost would be, he can address that then. And I'll see if there's some more concrete what normal.
I have a question. So I was under the impression that, and maybe I'm just wrong, I was under the impression that even for youth organizations, some of them were charged a roster fee and some of them were paying hourly fees. Is that right?
Youth organizations.
Or is it always a
Do
roster?
you mean when students are like coaching other students, or do you mean?
No, I mean,
soccer?
on this definition, like volunteer-led youth groups, just because it looks to me like these hourly rates in this new one are, it says adult, resident recreation and adult resident non-for-profit groups. I guess my comment is, I don't know what that means. Like, are we talking about groups that cater to adults? In which case this reads like any groups that cater to children are only charged a roster fee.
This is this current year.
I think it might be helpful to understand the distinction between when roster fees are being charged and when hourly rates are being charged. Because at least my impression was that it wasn't entirely just whether it was for children or for adults. But I may be wrong about that.
Right.
And then from a policy angle, because I think Deborah's right, we'll discuss the money part of it as a full board. All of these stars at the bottom and the descriptions, I'm just wondering if there have been any substantive changes to any of those rules in the way that it's laid out.
Right, and that I'm not aware of. That would be.
Good news is that it's still April, right? We're not gonna bring this to the
Yeah.
reorg until July.
No, I know we have time.
So, yeah, I think if it's helpful to have a continued conversation with Brian present, he would certainly welcome that. Yeah, and the work he did in preparing for today was really helpful.
And
It's great, but I think just from a
Yeah.
certainty standpoint, it would be good for us to understand what is exactly the same and what applies for who, also because if we understand it, hopefully the information's there for the public to understand.
Right,
too.
and it makes it easier for the public, and that's
Right.
kind of where the frustration comes in, is there wasn't any consistency, so we're trying to.
It's definitely a valuable effort, right? And we need it to be that the school is at the least breaking even, right?
So perhaps I share this with the budget chair and let the budget chair know that this has been updated, or Ms. Manuel, if you want to, as the
There's a meeting on
liaison.
Monday.
Yes, I don't know if this is slated to be discussed on Monday.
It's not, but we can bring it up if we have time, we'll bring it up, but I will definitely share it.
I leave that to you.
I mean,
that's
also,
really-
even if we don't discuss it in budget on Monday, I think we could just share it with the rest of the board so they know it's ongoing as an update.
We can put it in the packet.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
We'll put it in the next packet. Okay.
I just have, one other question. There's a lot of parentheticals that say formally, do we mean formerly?
Yes, I believe that's, it used to be 3.1.
Okay,
So
so
you're
when,
saying it's a typo?
but, so is that going to be in the final draft, or is that for us to make the comparison while we're editing and considering? Why is that it being included?
I think it's just to show you where it came from.
Right, but it's not going to be,
It wouldn't be there when it's published.
okay.
Yeah.
Because
And
I was,
it's
okay, I
forward.
don't want the community, right, and I don't want the community getting confused by
It's a bunch.
why that would be there if they have nothing to compare it to.
I agree.
Okay. So that was for our benefit.
Yes.
Any other questions about the regulations? Has everybody had a chance to digest, read? Because this was just given to us.
Yeah, this,
Literally just.
I can't do it this way, but I don't
I think
know.
we probably should all take a moment to look at it, put it in the packet and share it with the rest of the board, and then discuss it.
Yes,
It's also noted that this is a regulation, which is actually not our link.
true. However, we do want to be sure, because we had such an
That it's
extensive
clear.
discussion,
Yes.
that the regulations do reflect what we want as a policy.
Yes.
And as I'm sitting here trying to speed read, I think, because I don't know if the community, but we get our packets in advance, and so we can prepare and not sit here and read. And this was just given to us, and I appreciate that, because I know it's kind of hot off the presses.
It is.
But I don't feel
Mhm.
adequately prepared to discuss this right now. So let's put it in the packet, so these, the regulations, and then the current rates, and then the proposed rates, and we'll let everybody see it.
Okay.
And if we need to bring it back, I'll let you know that we need to bring it back into committee, but given that it's a regulation,
Right.
it's really something the board just basically has to say, yeah, okay, thank you for showing us.
Sounds
Yes?
good.
Okay.
Yep.
And I guess maybe, well, I don't know if you want to stay for the
No,
the equity discussion, Ms. Matt, it's been nice seeing you.
Thank you very much for-
If you want to leave, we completely understand.
Thank you.
I think you have something like, I don't know, budget to work on. Although I did see that there's been another extender to April, I want to say
It's
8th.
the 8th, which is Monday, but I'm hearing that it might not be until Tuesday, and then it's extended to 10 days. They can have their agreement, then everybody, all the worker bees have to do it and stuff.
Which does not make your job easier.
But we'll get there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so, 1.9, this is a new policy. The committee has weighed in on the policy before, so I'm bringing it back to you. I guess to give you an update, and also to get some direction from you if you think it's ready to go towards first read, or whether there's still more work to be done, is my hope that maybe we can come to that conclusion before we break. So we, as you know, we have a policy, which is new, 105. There's an exhibit, which is some definitions to support the policy. And then there is a policy checklist, which would be used as an exhibit internally.
So can we start with the policy? And I have duplicates here, so I'm kind of fumbling through my papers. So can we start with the policy itself?
Yeah, so the policy, what we did at the committee suggestion is that we brought it back to central office. So Dr. Hines and I spent some time looking at the original version, which was mostly from NISBA, and what we thought would be helpful for the district to have. What you have before you is some language that's been moved around and added to the policy
Excuse me.
for your consideration.
Okay, and for those who were here who need a refresher and those who weren't here who have no idea what we've done with this, the NISBA policy, the NISBA sample was so, we thought as a committee, was so dense and repetitive and unwieldy, and it was a nice effort, but we felt so discombobulated that we really focused very heavily as a committee on paring it down to a manageable, digestible essence without losing any meaning. And also adding our own, as in the district's philosophy, and keeping in mind the portrait of the graduate and our vision and mission. And so we took that and handed it off to administration, and this is what we got back. So I've been starting every single conversation, I feel it's only being a little policy hall, but does anybody want to start?
Okay.
I think it is now.
I have a couple of, contributions to make. Under goal, second sentence, it says equity and inclusive education. I feel like that should be equitable and inclusive education. At the end of that sentence, high school prepared for college, a career, and life. It's also in the exhibit with that language. I feel like it's
Which exhibit?
odd.
There's a bunch of exhibits, so there's the
Okay.
key definitions, which is E1. There's the equity policy checklist, which is E2.
Let's see if I can
And
find
then
it.
there's the chart.
Okay, equity policy checklist, E2. Bottom of the first paragraph says to achieve their fullest potential at school and in life.
Wait a minute. The bottom of the first paragraph, sorry, yes.
So we can discuss the proper wording of it. I find it odd. So we often, in terms of consistency, we talk about to achieve, a student's fullest potential. I feel like it should stop there. At school and in life, and then college, career, and life. I just feel like it's trying to be specific and yet being incredibly vague. And I feel like just stopping at fullest potential says more to the point of what, and it's consistent with a lot of the language that we already have in policies elsewhere, and just in sentiment. So I'm just throwing that out.
So I understand what you're saying about the last sentence of the first paragraph in Exhibit 2. How do you envision applying that to the last sentence in the goal for the
Aims to
limit
understand,
is,
identify, address, and eliminate biases, barriers, and disparities that might limit a student's chance to graduate high school and achieve their fullest potential, or something like that. Or
Or do you wanna use?
Limit a student's chance to achieve their fullest potential, so it's more consistent.
Right. To achieve their fullest. So in other words, the last sentence under goal would be, equitable and inclusive education aims to understand, identify, address, and eliminate the biases, barriers, disparities that limit a student's chance to achieve their fullest potential. And you don't want to say at school and in life? Just
I think
fullest
it,
potential
I
period?
feel like that's much, yeah, I think that muddies the waters and makes people say, well, what does that mean at school, what does that mean in life? What are we responsible for after they're 18,
Whereas
or
if
after
you
they're
don't
graduates?
specify, it's-
Yeah,
Fullest
It's
potential.
open.
yeah.
Ms. Gillen, are you okay with that?
I'm fine with that, thanks.
Okay. What else you got for us?
Me?
I actually have, it's a much lower down comment, but I think it's connected to the comment that Anne made. The last sentence before the policy awareness and notification part on the second page, it says, embracing diversity, inclusivity, and belonging will help the district reach our overarching goal of creating a community that ensures every student voice is heard and valued. I think that needs another sentence there, because I think it is important to hear every student voice and have those voices be valued, but we're a school district, so what's our actual overarching goal? It's to educate them so that they can reach their fullest potential. So I think there's an end of the sentence that needs to be added, or another sentence, because I think this implies a goal short of where our goal should be.
And how would you want to word that? What is your concept?
Let me think about it for a minute.
I'm also, trying to not be repetitive, and this isn't being written like an essay where we need a complete sentence. And I feel like we've covered that sentiment kind of in the introduction of describing our goal.
The one sentence, embracing diversity will help the district reach its.
Or it belongs in the beginning. It also seems just disconnected to how it's been outlined.
This last sentence.
Yeah. It just, it doesn't really have a home there.
So can we move this
Right.
sentence to be the last sentence of the goal? If you think this sentence has value, but it's just not, but it's just hanging out someplace in the middle of the policy.
No, you're right, I agree. You can move it and you could actually take out, you can insert this somehow in that other thought, which solves my problem.
So at the end of the goal paragraph? Because it says what the overarching goal is, and then the sentence says how that embracing will help the district reach the goal.
Or it goes into the very top paragraph.
Go ahead. Well, the top paragraph talks about the framework and sets up the introduction for the.
I'm sorry, not the top paragraph, the second paragraph.
Ah, okay.
I would put it right in the middle of the paragraph under goal. So then it would read, the overarching goal of the district is to enable every student to thrive and reach their fullest potential. Embracing
Embracing
diversity, inclusivity, and belonging will help the district
Yes,
ensure
yes,
every student voice is heard and valued.
yes.
Equity and inclusive education aims to understand, identify, address, and eliminate the biases, barriers, and disparities that limit a student's chance to graduate high school prepared for NASA.
Limit a student's chance to achieve their fullest potential. Okay. Any other comments?
Yes. Under governance, if this is a board policy or a district policy, it seems to me that we should start with the district will demonstrate an ongoing commitment to this goal by reviewing and creating policies. And however we want to reword that, I feel like the sentences should switch. It feels too specific and then more broad. I feel like we should start broad and go specific.
I agree.
Okay, so the district will demonstrate an ongoing commitment to this goal by reviewing and/or creating policies through an equity lens.
Do we need to specify what the building level DEI committees will be doing? 'Cause the existence of the committee is not the part that really demonstrates the commitment, right?
So
Maybe
it
we don't
should
want to
say-
get that,
Have building level DEI committees that follow the CRSE framework, New York State Ed or something like that.
Say again, please?
We'll have building level DEI committees that address the CRSE framework from New York State Ed. It's the framework that has been established.
Yes, no, I understood that. I was just trying to figure out how you were going to change the sentence. So the paragraph would read, governance, the district will demonstrate an ongoing commitment to this goal by reviewing and or creating policies through an equity lens, and then refer to checklist. And then in addition, the district will have building level DEI committees. How would you finish that?
I think you can leave it the way it is. We'll demonstrate an ongoing commitment to this goal by having building level DEI committees that address the framework, created by.
I think we were using that language for the first sentence though, weren't we? Or no?
Well, I was saying in addition,
Oh, I don't think we need to demonstrate an ongoing commitment. I think that could stay in the second sentence.
in addition, the district will have building level DEI committees that address the framework.
The CRSE, New York State Ed framework. I can give you the
What do
proper
we mean?
language.
But what do we mean that will address the framework? That
Because,
language
they-
just sounds,
the
what does that
Is
mean?
it address or is it follow?
yeah, follow is better.
Thank you.
Follow is better.
And it may be that they will oversee something.
Or ensure adherence
Yeah,
to,
that's it.
we need an active verb in there that will,
And I'll give you the proper language.
it will ensure district, will ensure,
And a community member shared an interesting thing with me that I think is a valuable critique. We use a lot of acronyms.
yes,
So we should probably spell out what CRSE is.
well, we do say, we call it culturally responsible sustaining education up top. We can, in the first sentence, we can put in parentheses CRSE. But I want to make sure I have the language under governance for that second sentence. In addition, the district will have building level DEI committees. Is it their purpose, whose purpose shall be, or do they have more than one purpose?
I think they're very individualized at this
Okay.
point. I know that this year, part of their task was to address welcoming and affirming environments. Is that
Sure.
correct,
That's
Dr.?
good.
Dr. Shields, sorry.
Okay. So then I'll
Which
say,
is the
and
very first principle of the framework.
each committee will ensure adherence to the CRSE. We can draft this and bring it back. I feel as though this needs to come back here.
Okay.
Did you have other comments?
Under teaching and learning, second sentence, the superintendent or designee shall ensure that all curriculum and instructional materials for all grades reflect the board's commitment to educational equity, and that such materials shall be age appropriate. In the future, I didn't.
I took out in the future also, but I
Yeah.
think we need a period, and then we should start with such.
Okay.
Such materials shall be age
Okay.
appropriate, comma, reflect diversity, comma, include a range of perspective and experiences. and shall be, okay, well, I have a comment about the bias, but can I piggyback onto your comment?
Please.
And it says, and shall be examined for bias. And I say, by whom? Who's doing this? The superintendent or designee, the assistant superintendent for curriculum, the building principal, the individual building DEI committees, who does this?
Or maybe if it's like all of us being reflective about it in an ongoing way, it shouldn't be phrased quite that way.
Is it important to define who will do it?
Um,
I think it's important to do it. But I see that this might be done by a building team. I see it might be done by a curriculum office representative.
For consistency's sake, that's why I raised it.
Mhm.
Because you could have building level, you could have grade level teachers in one school, you could have a principal in another school. I mean, I'm just saying hypothetically, I don't know how it works at the granular level. So that's why I'm turning to you as the administrator. So that we don't overstep our bounds by saying, hey, this is, who would you recommend?
I see policy as like value statements and making a statement about what is important to us as a district. I'm not sure you need to define who will do it. But I think you're saying it's important that it be done.
Yes,
I think that the wording could be different, and, you know, in my head initially, I was thinking, and shall be free of bias, but that's actually not what we mean, right? Because if you think about a well-rounded curriculum, especially K-12, and really probably starting in the elementary schools, there are many valuable books and resources that are not free of bias. But if you're having a conversation about the bias in the book or in the material, right, we're not interested in ejecting anything with bias out of the curriculum. That's counterproductive. But maybe the wording here needs to be something about conscious of bias in materials or something like that.
my quest for consistency is also because what I may view as a bias, it's individualized. There are global understood biases, but then there's also individual. So that's why I'm concerned about the consistency and a holistic view of the bias. Because it also involves training, it involves sensitivity, it involves awareness, it involves a lot of different things. And some people are at a higher level or higher awareness than others by virtue of either their age or the exposure or the training or whatever it happens to be.
Sure.
And so that's where I am.
So
That's where I'm.
do we achieve what that sentiment is by saying that it includes a range of perspectives and experiences?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, is if that's just a period there. Or if the word we're going for is prejudice, like doesn't perpetuate prejudice
And bias.
and bias. It can be both, but I think that's what we're trying to get at. Not that there isn't any mention of any of this, but that it doesn't perpetuate it.
Okay, so shall be, and so how would we, and shall be viewed with the goal of not perpetuating stereotypes, prejudice, or biases, or?
I mean, could it be a separate sentence that says something like educators should be conscientious about not perpetuating prejudice, stereotypes, and bias?
You wanna include that and think about it on
Yeah.
on the next draft?
Yeah, we can do that. Because I think that's what we're getting at, right? We don't we should be discussing all of this. We should not be perpetuating it.
Right, because it's two-sided. It's reflecting diversity, the range of perspectives and experiences, but also there's an affirmative desire to not perpetuate the
Right.
negative.
And I think there's a piece here too, always, where we're drafting policy and it's aspirational, but we're also trying to codify what is happening already as the ideal. And I think it is happening already as the ideal where kids are reading things and they're talking, I know even in the elementary schools, about what the biases are in the material, how it's not true anymore. So I think that's a better way to go at the end of the sentence. I think shall be examined for bias is very open-ended in terms of who is examining, but also what that even means.
So as a member of the district equity team, we actually worked with tools designed to help professionals analyze materials for bias. I don't know if what we're really grappling with is that perhaps we need an exhibit or some kind of a way of explaining to the community / board members, as these are, the driving policies, that kind of show examples of what that would be referring to. Because there's actually, the reason I'm understanding that the language is there is because there's actual tools used for analyzing, for example, reading programs. Our committee was able to really identify and understand how materials are analyzed. So I don't know if that would be helpful in this regard, or.
And what entity will supply this committee with those examples?
So we were doing it with NYU. I don't know if there's perhaps tools that Dr. Feeney's office uses in purchasing or selecting materials. Maybe we could ask if any of that is being used, and then maybe we discuss. I think that that's what that's implying, so I think that might be helpful for us to understand more thoroughly processes that are used.
Okay, so we can ask Dr. Feeney.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're definitely bringing this back to committee.
Yes.
Any other comments about the language before I?
That's all I have.
Okay. So I know we lifted the language of the first paragraph. I can't remember from where, but I went back. Oh, so I got this from the New York State Education Department. That's what okay. So they talk about meeting the diverse needs of children and families. I prefer students and their families as opposed to children. In the first sentence.
Yes.
Yes, students and their families, okay. In the next paragraph, first sentence, by following this guidance, the Board of Education is committed to creating, maintaining, et cetera, experience a sense of belonging and academic success, but there's no mention of fulfilling their potential. And I feel as though potential really should be somewhere in this opening salve that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So is everybody okay? Because academic success looks very different for different students.
Yes.
Whereas filling potential, although meaning different things to different students, it's really what we want, right? We want academic success for every student, but not every student can necessarily achieve academic success within the various timeframes that the state law mandates, right? But they may fulfill their potential. So So I'm not sure if I want to take academic success out, but I do feel that fulfilling their potential should be in there somewhere. Any thoughts on where it should go?
Well, academic success is kind of a judgment,
Yes, that's what I was
which we've been trying to remove from a lot of our policy work. So I agree with you that the fullest, a lot of our policies refer to potential.
So maybe an experience, a sense of belonging and ability to fulfill their individual potential. Because we're committed to creating and maintaining a positive and inclusive learning environment where all students have the ability to fulfill their individual potential. And take out academic success. Okay. I've got all my comments under the goals. Okay, on the second page, under workforce diversity, this kind of goes into the discussion we had earlier on about how we look at personnel. The district will strive to recruit and retain a highly qualified, diverse, and inclusive workforce that recognizes and values the differences among people. I know that relates directly to diversity, but I thought it was also important that we add some language about that we want our diverse workforce to adhere to the district's philosophy and vision and mission. To me, it's not simply enough that we hire, we have a representation of diversity within the district, but to me, that representation is hollow if those very diverse individuals don't adhere to our philosophy. And so, even though it says and values the differences among people, I would also like to say values the differences among people as well as the district's philosophy and vision and mission, something like that. And it goes in line with what you said earlier, Dr. Shields, about we want a good fit in the district. We want a good cultural fit. We want in terms of diversity, and also a good philosophical fit.
Yes.
And we have that through our vision and mission. So language,
So values the vision and mission and portrait of the graduate?
not sure. So that recognizes and values the differences among people as well as the district's vision and mission and portrait of a graduate. And then under training, where did I put this here? The district will provide staff and the board with learning opportunities as needed to raise awareness of the issues surrounding equity and inclusion. Oh, I changed the word to the word will. So the district will provide staff and the district will implement measures to help counteract biases and practices. So I just changed to will. Does that make sense?
I missed which two you're talking about.
Under training, the first paragraph,
There's two twos in that sentence, so I lost track of which one.
after inclusion. So it's reading,
Oh,
the
okay.
district will provide staff with learning opportunities to raise awareness, and then it's also saying, and to implement measures. But that doesn't make sense to me,
And will.
and will implement measures. And then under policy awareness and notification, the last phrase, that we will share this policy through when it's published, blah, blah, blah. And then it should say, and through other appropriate school communications. I think through should be in there, or via, And what would be examples of other appropriate school communications?
So I was thinking of when that was written, that, superintendent is sending out regular communications to the district.
Okay, so we don't need to enumerate, we just keep it very, very general. Those were my only comments in addition to the other ones. I do want to get to the exhibits, but I also want to make sure we have time for community comments. So since we're bringing this back, unless anybody has anything pressing about the definitions. Let's talk about the definitions, and we will definitely bring everything back. And do want to make time for community comments, so tell me about the definitions, Dr. Shields.
So there was a long list of definitions that were provided in the NISBA sample.
Yes.
So that was brought back to central office. Dr. Pernick then brought 7 of those definitions to the committee, the district level committee, district-wide committee. Before it was, shall we say, dismantled or no longer met. And the committee worked on those 7 definitions.
So that was purposeful.
Yes, because they were thought to be the most important of the list of definitions that was provided by NISBA. So Dr. Pernick and Central Office is open to adding more definitions if necessary. But the thought was, let's focus on the 7 most important first.
I have made a complete mess of my piles.
Okay.
Can you please tell me which one is?
Yeah, we didn't have, this was given to us just this morning.
Okay. so
That's why you don't have
Maybe
it.
it's.
You have the larger definition list of
Okay.
about 3 pages.
Okay. I did not see.
And so in the 3 pages that
Okay.
we were previously given, I don't know if the community has these 3 pages. The ones that were not part of the 7 definitions, those definitions are the ones that were the NISBA definitions. They were left intact.
Correct.
Okay, so for example, that would have been culture, cultural competence, cultural responsiveness, disaggregated data. There are many. So I will be here another 20 minutes if I read through all of them.
So I don't remember it the same way.
Okay,
Um,
this is how it was explained to me.
Okay, so I was a part of that last meeting. We were broken up into groups. I believe there was 2 groups. Ms. Malani, was it 2 groups? Yeah. So we were in 2 groups. We were given a list of terms for each group. Our group, I remember, mostly got through our list. I don't remember what the list was, forgive me, I didn't take notes, we had people ferociously typing. So I don't know or remember what our group did, and I don't know what the other group was responsible for. At that point, it was not clear that we weren't meeting again. So we were told we would finish it at the next meeting, and then we didn't have a next meeting. So I don't recall that we as a committee decided on the 7 most important terms.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what we do with that now. So that's, maybe we can ask Ms. Mowat, am I remembering that accurately?
I'm also seeing.
You are remembering that accurately. We also at the time did not receive a copy of the policy or the draft policy to know if the terms that were selected for us to review actually reflected the terms that were in the policy. So that was another thing in hindsight that now I'm recalling.
As I'm now having these 2 versions side by side for the first time, it looks to me that the definitions that are on the page of 7 are the same definitions I'm seeing in the, I guess my question is, I don't know if I have the original NISBA definitions. Are the definitions that we have in front of us, these 7, are these reworded?
I believe most of them are reworded.
Okay, so that's why they're the same then as what I'm seeing in the exhibit.
And they were sourced, so there was sourcing in the work that the committee did. The sourcing is not reflected here, so the content that you see here was not taken, it's not like an edited version of the NISBA sample policy. These are actively different and deliberately different definitions based on a variety of reputable sources.
Okay, so I wanted to make sure of that because I do see now the definition. And I now see how, for example, achievement gap is different. Okay,
So,
that's what I wanted to.
so if the committee wants more definitions, we're certainly open to that. And Dr. Carnica said that he will go ahead and, revise any further definitions that are requested.
Okay.
But you're right in the sense that you didn't have a policy, because as you can see, the policy is still in the works. Is it more effective to finish the policy first
I'm glad
and
the
then
definitions.
see what definitions are most appropriate based on the policy we've created?
Mm-hmm.
So I understand the quandary
Chicken
we're in, yes.
Chicken egg. Okay, so what I would suggest is that now we understand that there were 7 as opposed to this full list, that we come prepared for the next time this is brought back into committee to think about, well, no, because that's putting the cart before the horse then, right? So do we agree then to hold off on the definitions until we have completed the policy? And then, which we're very close to doing, since we're very close to doing it, why don't we look at the definitions before the next time that this is on and try to figure out which definitions are most appropriate to have as an exhibit? Because I think we're not going to be adding a whole bunch of different language in the policy at this point. Is that a good plan?
That makes sense. Can I make a sort of global comment on the
Sure,
definitions?
yeah.
So, it looks to me like, I think it's right from the sample policy, this first sentence language of the definitions are offered to foster a deeper understanding of equity, inclusivity, and diversity. And maybe this is me, speaking from a philosophical point, but maybe we can discuss it. I think that part of the challenge that sort of the world faces in these diversity, equity, and inclusivity conversations is the perception that it's this kind of like woo-woo, beating a drum, touchy-feely thing going on. And I think that from a very practical perspective is, yes, it's very important that people feel included, and this is about feelings, but I think it's also about making our schools better and our society better. And it is just plain hard fact that is better if we value diversity, equity, and inclusivity, and there's all this value to it. I would want to change this sentence to read something more like it's to provide clarity and a common language, right? Because that's really what it is. I think this kind of language, I think, turns off a certain population of people. And I think that theme is echoed in some of the language of the definitions as well. I would want to see these feel a little bit less subjective and more plain, hard definitions, because these are actually definitions of things. And there are really good practical reasons why we value this and why it is a value for every single child in the school district that we value.
So on that point, once again, I apologize for not remembering what terms my group worked on. Part of the conversation while we were working on that was these cannot be subjective definitions. They have to be factual and driven by science and not judgmental. in any way. Once again, I don't remember which ones we did, so, and I haven't had a chance to read through these to know if there, as you're saying, there could be a lot of judgmental language in here that definitely doesn't belong. So I concur. This needs work.
So I would suggest that we, in order to have community comments, that we bring this back. Because this is going to be a much longer
In
conversation.
detail, it's a longer conversation, 100%.
That we bring this back and,
After we have the policy though.
after we have the policy,
Focus on the policy
Yeah.
first, and then
yes.
support the policy with clear definitions.
I think we're very, very close on the policy. I hope we're very.
I totally forgot to bring up a point.
Okay, so
and
go ahead.
I hope I don't throw us off.
Go ahead. Is
Going,
it back to the policy?
yes,
Okay.
back to the policy, under student supports, discipline and wellness.
Yes.
I'm wondering if we are lacking by not recognizing disproportionality in that paragraph.
Maintaining non-discrimination. And then we would make and for,
Do
how
you
would
think
you?
it's captured? By saying
Discriminatory,
non-discriminatory?
disciplinary?
Yeah, because disproportionality is a kind of unintentional discrimination, right? It doesn't need to be intentional. But if you think it's not captured, I'll give you hearing first, what you're thinking.
I think you could be right if there's deep reading going on. I wonder if it's just more powerful to use the word. Because as we said, an actual definition for disproportionality is based in fact.
Maintaining.
And it also supports, it avoids what you're describing, which is, this is touchy-feely, and disproportionality is very grounded in data and fact.
Right.
Okay, so
I mean, does it take care of it by putting a sentence somewhere else that talks about how bias can be intentional or unintentional?
I think what Nan is saying is very specific and a very important piece to add. Regardless of whether bias is intentional or unintentional, there's a very real issue of disproportionality.
It's true.
So let's figure out how to word that.
And you'll notice it in the first paragraph of Exhibit 2, the equity policy checklist refers to disproportionality. Because that language is from our moral imperative.
Because we are a budding time, should we set this aside and know we're coming back to it?
Yes.
And maybe see if we have time for some community comments?
Yes,
That's what told us.
So I would only bring it up there because it might help
Yes,
you
thank you.
know what you want to put in that part
yes, and we can
for
always.
student support.
I'm sorry, I did not mean to, I was so excited, I did not mean to cut you off. We can, and if we figure out that language, we can put it into the draft that we're bringing back, since we've already discussed it in public. It's not as though we're having these ideas, right? So if you think about it, share the language with Javi.
Okay.
We'll incorporate it. Okay, community comment time. I saw Ms. Alvarez's hand go first.
Sandra Alvarez. So just for the equity, inclusion, I'm seeing what you listed as diversity and education, for that policy. So one part of in the definitions, actually, I have brought it up in the past, and I didn't hear who went through the definitions and finalized the definitions, but I have brought it up in the past at policy. It still doesn't list gender identity and expression. This definition lists gender expression only, where I think the last policy had a similar variance of like which expression or which terminology that for Washington was gonna go by. New York State specifies gender identity. So I just think personally that if the state is emphasizing that expression, that the definition should follow suit.
Yes, I actually had it on one of the checklists we didn't get to, but yes.
Thank you. And then, for the definition, not definitions, but terminology, there's been a lot of back and forth within the district also of the use of DEI and just the acronyms, right? This policy specifically uses DEI as its title and throughout the whole page. The committee building levels, so at some point, the equity team, the district-wide equity team became the district-wide equity team, and the D and the I were dropped. I don't believe that was consulted with the equity team or the members on it. That was a decision by the cabinet. So for me, and the current building level teams are called equity teams. So your policy specifies DEI building teams, but there is no such thing currently. There is no building level DEI teams, there are building level equity teams. And while it's like semantics of like just fixing up terminology, I do think it's important because how I felt when the name was changed just sent like a signal also of what is the focus. Is the focus on the equity only, which 100% is important and as important as the other two. But it feels like this policy is emphasizing all three. So just consistency with follow through of, was there a reason why it was changed by the cabinet that wasn't reflected within this policy or to the board? And now if we're making a policy, will the teams, the building level teams, be updated as far as their names? And the reason names are important is just what is the goal, right? And I think that even with the district level equity team, the final goals were never really established, like there's a lot back and forth, which I really appreciate this policy and the work that you guys are doing with this policy. But to make it meaningful, I think it should be emphasized of what is the goals. I think you laid out a lot of them. So that would just be my question of like follow through throughout the whole district, specifically with building level teams. And then the last thing with that document, with that policy is, because it did come up last year in the equity teams, is I do appreciate that you have now a checklist as far as policy goes, and I think that's really important. The CRC framework specifically has a checklist when it comes to curriculum. I don't believe it referenced policy, but they have a very intricate framework for their checklist when it comes to curriculum. So this is more of like a hope, that curriculum is also considered with this lens and that framework in mind, which if we're going into policies and making the follow through occur, I wonder if that can be considered as well, is what the CRC has already established. Again, I know that this vote was very long, right, and this is condensed, and I think the comment then was that also was very long, but potentially just relooked at that one as well.
That may fit in with what you had mentioned about speaking with Dr. Feeney.
Yeah.
And
I made note of that.
And Dr. Shields, you would check with Dr. Hines as to
DEI
yes,
versus equity,
great.
absolutely, yes.
And just a clarity question, I'm sorry, I did look that. For the policies on the fees, so for the fee, I'm trying to look at the notes, sorry. There is, one of the clauses says 75, you guys changed it from 50% to 70 or 75%. There's like 1,000 papers, I don't know which policy number it is.
1,500, it's facilities use.
So you changed it, does that mean nonprofit organizations or for the percentage of membership of residents? Or is that policy specific for anyone renting from the district? So I know priority is gonna be given to nonprofits for use of the facilities, but it doesn't clarify the restrictions or the qualifications of the 75% mark for for-profit companies.
we would have to ask,
Yeah, we'd have to ask Mr. Graham.
Mr. Graham.
Because I am under the impression, potentially, that a for-profit potentially, and vague if they're a not-for-profit group, I don't see them meeting the 50% mark, let alone 75% mark of the district, of members within the district, using the facility currently.
I understand.
So you'll ask Mr. Graham and Ms. Manuel?
Yeah,
So
I
can you give
think,
us an example of what you might mean? What group would not meet 75, do you think?
I think recently the fields are being used by organizations that have a large base.
So like travel teams or things?
Correct.
So they're not Port Washington based necessarily?
I don't know what they would be listing, so I don't know, again, if they're listed as a profit company, are they getting the same requirement of that 50-75%? And if it's not, then it will be moot, it won't matter because they don't need to meet any of those numbers. But for the if it is for not-for-profit, then that's a different question if it's, they're listed like that.
I think it's supposed to be everyone, and I also was under the impression we already had a 75% requirement. So I don't know if we're updating the regulation to catch up with ourselves, but I thought that that's where we were.
It looks like it was 50.
No, I'm saying, but in practice,
Yeah.
I think it has been 75% in practice.
Okay, so we'll find out.
We'll find out from Rob.
Thank you.
Going to the other side of the room, also Zach, any questions? Okay, back to the side of the room. Ms. Maloney?
Yes, thank you. Yes, good morning. I have a few comments on the equity, inclusivity, and diversity policy, and one question from a personnel standpoint. On the equity policy, and my comments are mostly around the issue that Ms. Gilliard raised around sort of the squishiness of the language and like the kumbaya drum circle feel of the policy. You know, it kind of starts for me in workforce diversity because we're not really getting at the overarching point that the purpose of a school district is to deliver the highest quality education to its students. And I think that's lost in this statement, which kind of communicates diversity for diversity's sake, which is explicitly not what we are doing. So I would love to see in that section something to the very clear effect of it recognizes and values the differences among people and delivers the highest quality education to our students. And that I think captures the essence of what this policy is intended to do. And in that, along with that line of thinking, you know, in the second paragraph, first page, we say the board understands that equity and inclusive education, or equitable and inclusive education, is achieved when adults affirm each student by creating a respectful learning environment inclusive of actual or perceived personal characteristics. That doesn't actually feel like a respectful learning environment or a respectful way of framing it, because it does go both ways. If anybody has read this week's New Yorker, there's a great article about what's happening in Amherst, Massachusetts, and kind of the ecosystem of respect. So I could see that being revised to something like, you know, an equitable and inclusive education is achieved when schools create respectful learning and working environments for all students, staff, and families. I think that's part of what this policy is intended to do. Along the lines of kind of that squishy language, we get into student supports, discipline, and wellness. We talk about the district will strive to employ programs and practices that enhance all students' self-confidence and self-esteem. A school district cannot give students self-confidence and self-esteem. It's definitional, right? You only get that from yourself. Students
Where
can-
were you?
Student supports, discipline, and
Thank you, okay,
wellness.
sorry, okay.
Students get self-confidence and self-esteem from self-reliance, from feelings of capability, from feelings of achievement, which is a relative term and not a judgmental one, right? So I would love to see that language kind of shift to that the district is committed to employing programs and practices that enhance all students' sense of self-reliance, capability, and achievement. Because confidence and esteem are outcomes, not gifts, right?
Does anybody have, I appreciate the comment. are the two of you okay with incorporating that language? Does it make sense to you?
So.
This is where we have this symbiotic relationship with the community. When the community says something, we say, oh, that's a really good point.
It's interesting, it's a very interesting point, and I like the additional language. And I think that we should bring this back up and discuss it further when we have more time. And I wonder a little bit if the way I'm perceiving the sentence and the way Jessica's perceiving the sentence doesn't also bring to light a little bit of the differences in our elementary educations. Because as a parent and as a board member, I'm witnessing our ruler model school. And I think there is a lot of stuff that happens that is aimed at enhancing students' self-confidence and self-esteem. But I also 100% agree that it's self-reliance that is very important. So I think we should have a deeper conversation, or really a longer conversation, because I think we could go deep in 4 sentences, but we should have a longer conversation about what the wording there should look like and what we're trying to capture. Because I think she's right that it's missing, but maybe we want to tweak this wording a little bit so it's not as outcome-y, but it still gets at some of these other points.
Okay, so maybe what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll synthesize everything in, so we have it in front of us, we don't have to remember what was said a month prior, and we can work with that and see how we like it to fit. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, just one more comment on the equity policy and the question about personnel. In teaching and learning, under that goals section, the in the future really kind of threw me.
We took that out.
I know we took that out. But I do think it's important to note that all newly implemented materials, right, like, you're not doing anything in the past. Anyway, again, a lot of issues with the definitions, but I think Dr. Shields pointed out that it would be helpful to have at least a more robust idea of what's in the policy before, so that this can truly be a glossary to help understand the policy as opposed to lecture people on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I don't think that's the goal of this policy. My question about personnel, because it was raised at the beginning of the meeting, is can the board or Dr. Shields clarify for the community that what is proposed in the current budget proposal does not means 0 cuts to classroom teaching staff. Based on the read of what's in that proposed budget and the line items, it looks like there are no planned cuts to classroom teaching staff, and that all reductions will come through retirement, attrition, and other staff cuts that students will not feel through classroom teachers. That would be a great clarification either now or for the community at the broader meeting. And also in the third budget workshop presentation, there was sort of a line item list of where potential staff reductions could come from, like 1 clerical, 1 custodial, 1 floating nurse, 12 teachers. That would be very helpful to see when you're talking about the 9.5 planned FTE reductions moving forward. Thank you.
I can say very generally, because a community member came up to me yesterday in a public setting, very alarmed, you're cutting teachers. And I said, there are retirements, there is attrition, and we're adding 1 FTE to alleviate classroom size, where that FTE is up to the administration when the enrollment numbers come in.
That's for a Pierce test then?
I beg your pardon?
That's for a Pierce test?
That's for the supermajority, yes.
Right.
Yes,
It's for the current proposed
to
budget.
stay within the tax cap, it was a cut, I wanna say 24 teachers. And I believe there would not have been the money for, I don't wanna misspeak, so
So what happens
I'll just leave it
next year?
there. I'll just leave
So
it there.
appears the tax cap again next year?
We're not, we don't know.
No financial prognosis for the years to come?
We had a financial prognosis
We did.
presented at not this past one, the one last.
Right, and that's what it shows, that you will be at the same point next year.
Potential.
Is that right?
Potentially, and there
I
may,
don't- I didn't
there
see
may be
potential.
cuts, but that's a budget issue.
Right, I'm not asking about the issue, I'm asking for
It's about the
clarification
personnel, yes.
on personnel
Yes.
as it relates to budget, because there was the comment that assuming this budget, right? Like, I think it's important for the community to understand.
And my understanding also is that the FTEs would be, there could be paras
There might be some paraprofessionals as well.
through
some
attrition
clerical.
and,
I mean, just to give you an example, you did see that there's a reduction in a classroom teacher at pre-K,
Yes,
okay?
yes,
yes,
And I
K
think
to
it-
12, teaching staff.
K to 12.
That's those salary lines, I think that 8 to 12 or 7 to 12 line item was a reduction of about $2,000, which must be through retirement and attrition.
Right, so there's some that will be attrition, there are some that are retirements, through retirements, or resignations.
Right.
But there are also some positions like the ARP, funded positions, 5 of those 6 are not being funded. One of them is.
The social worker at
The
the middle school.
social worker at the middle school is being funded, that's one of the 6. But the other 5 will be reductions. Those are, I just want to be careful with you. You're asking about classroom positions. So these, to me, they are teachers, or in the case of the guidance counselor,
Yes.
they're not elementary type classroom positions in the sense of like
Right,
that. So I just want to make sure we're
or
talking
middle
about
or
the
high
same
school,
thing.
or
right?
secondary level classroom.
Yeah, so there were 3 reading teachers in that ARP list. There was 1 guidance counselor.
Yes,
And there was also a math AIS reduction as well.
yes.
So yes, there are reductions.
But those were planned before this budget, right? We knew the money was expiring and those were not included in the rollover budget. So I'm looking at sort of what's net new in this budget and how is that being sort of telegraphed to the community, because we still are hearing a lot of, they're cutting teachers, we have to cut teachers, and the answer is K to 12. There are no planned classroom teacher cuts. With the exception of four ARP positions, one of which is pre-K.
No. The pre-K is not an ARP position.
The pre-K is
Pre-K
actually a
will
cut.
fund.
That's about, the pre-K
there's
guidance
three-
counselor
there's
was
3
an
reading.
ARP position?
There's 3 reading on the ARP list.
Yeah.
There's 1 math AIS on the ARP list, and there's 1 guidance counselor on the ARP list.
Okay.
That's 5
So
positions.
are there any non-instructional staff cuts?
Yes, we were just mentioning that there's some educational assistants, there's clerical.
And so
Administrators.
And administrators.
To administrators.
So who from the administration?
We're not going to discuss specific personnel here.
But I think having that breakout,
Relationship between instructional and non-instructional, do we have any of that to show the community, to discuss with the community?
I didn't understand the
What
question.
is the relationship between the cuts of instructional and non-instructional?
So what's the relationship between?
Yeah, as a simple ratio.
I think out of fairness, there was community members with hand raised and we were
Yes.
still going through. I am
Yes.
now also
Yes.
talking out of line,
Yes.
so I apologize.
No, we'll,
I'm gonna excuse myself,
we'll come back.
but I do
It's a
believe,
valid point.
But I think-
fairness wise, we probably have been waiting very
Yeah.
patiently.
Sorry.
Right.
I couldn't see Sarah.
But I think your question is can we get more specific on
can we get
on the
clarity
Yes.
at the same level that have been presented in previous workshops, just so the community understands what this means for their children's classrooms?
Yes, and we can go back to the budget chair or at the final meeting.
I understand.
That's it.
It's a reasonable question.
Hi, we're probably good at that. I have a question on, or a request really for the facilities exhibit, and this might be a question for Mr. Graham. There was a suggestion in a prior policy meeting where this policy came up, whether it would be possible to see the effect of revenue from the old, the proposed numbers versus what are the current numbers, as in how is it actually affecting the bottom line of revenue?
I think we were told it was
100,000.
another 100,000.
We would get it.
And in terms of like, how does that affect the individual for-profit versus not-for-profit? I think it'd be important to see, are we disproportionately affecting the non-for-profits or for-profits? like, is the percent change hit more for the profits, for profit or non-for-profit?
So it's another budget question. I try not to step
I'm
on
sorry.
toes, right? I'm very sensitive about,
Totally valid, just in terms of like figuring out,
yes.
on this policy, are we, disproportionately affecting non-for-profits versus for-profits in the our policy use? And the second also is it has to do with our investment policy in the reporting section. It's on page 5, operations, auditing, and reporting. I think what might be helpful for the community is, I see that in D, there's a monthly reporting that's furnished to the Board of Education. But in terms of what our investments are, is it possible, or would the board consider that at least a snapshot of where the investments are, allocated or how they're allocated, even if it's just like percent-wise, like is it cash, is it equities, is it bonds? So we understand where the school district's exposure is from a financial perspective.
I'm trying to follow you. Our monthly reports, that must be, is that the warrant reports we get? Because I know those are confidential.
I don't know that investments are in the marketplace, are they?
I don't remember seeing those. I'm trying to.
It's an interesting question.
Monthly reports are different. So can you repeat your comment or your concern again?
Yeah, I just think it would be helpful for the public community to understand where the investment risk lies for the district in terms of what is the district's financial exposure to the markets.
Did that come through our audit reports?
Possibly. That's a question that we would
To ask
want to ask
Ms.
Ms.
Manuel.
Manuel.
Yeah,
Then you
Yeah.
can shoot it to her, or
because,
maybe go home and look at our audit reports.
yeah, because the auditors certain, I can't imagine they don't look at
Right.
risk.
Right, but in terms of like how we don't have to go into specifics like we own X number of stocks of IBM or whatever, but like having the community know there's a percentage allocation of cash, bonds, and equity.
I think it may be in the audit report, but I think we could clarify, we get the answer back.
Again, I think that's a budget committee
Yes.
question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But I think it's a good question.
Absolutely.
Will you ask Ms. Manuel?
I can, yeah.
Just so we can follow up here?
Sure.
Okay,
To go to find, regarding the investments, it also would be super helpful to know which accounts do they relate to in our actuals. So when one looks at the actuals, they can know, oh, okay, these are the investments, those are the amounts, because that portion of it is definitely public information. So if you could add that on, that would be really great. So, yeah, I was just wondering, looking at the whole child, is there any sort of metric that can help parents understand success in terms of specific numbers of the whole child philosophy? And of course,
I don't understand the question, I'm sorry.
well, so you said that comparing districts according to the state tests,
Okay, so this is an email that you sent to me, just so the public understands. You and I had a conversation by happenstance.
Okay, but separately from the email.
I know, but I have to give
context
context.
that we can look at for the whole child.
There
is
no way to.
There's no way to quantify in terms of data the success of the whole child philosophy, is that right?
I think it differs for every child. My personal philosophy, I can't speak on behalf of anybody else here. So I'll give you an example. My child didn't sit for the state tests. So, but I always understood where she was in school. I didn't have that metric, but yet I knew how she was doing, where she was thriving, where she needed help. So you're asking me a very personal philosophy that I don't tell everybody this is how their philosophy has to be. So it's a conversation we can have more.
I think it's a question really to pose to our administration, but
That's a Dr.
I think you might wanna,
Well, Dr. Schultz.
is your underlying question,
I'd love to hear what you think about that.
I think it might be good to step back to, like, what are you trying to get at, right? Are you trying to understand if you have a way of measuring whether the whole child philosophy is
I'm trying to
successful?
measure the success of our district, that's what I'm trying to do. Academically.
Okay, so I don't know that we have to insert whole child into that to measure the success of our district.
So how
I
do
think
you
we have
measure?
multiple measures that we use to look at whether or not we think our district is successful.
Okay, so what
I'll
will those
defer to
be?
you if you'd like to jump in.
Well, I mean, for example, what we've talked about publicly, is how are we going to make decisions around driving up our high school graduation rate? That's one level of success as an institution. So
And so
we
if
make
you-
decisions all the time, and we're looking towards that portrait of a graduate, we're looking towards our vision and mission, and we're looking towards how do our kids exit the school district in 12th grade.
But you deny the state ranking, entirely.
No, that's me. That was just
Okay.
me
What
speaking
about
as
you,
an
Dr.
individual.
So are you asking about state assessments? When
I'm
you say
asking about the most basic, district ranking the state uses.
So we, of course, there's multiple data points that we get from the state that we take into consideration, absolutely. But just like we're not only looking at graduation rate, we're not gonna only look at state testing or rankings. We're gonna look at multiple factors.
So the way the Port Washington Union Free School District has done throughout the years, and the fact that it's number 56 at the moment, does that matter anything or not?
It's another data point for us to look at.
Just another data point, but not a very important one.
I didn't say it's not important or it's extremely important. I'm just saying it's a data point that we certainly take into consideration.
Okay, okay. Okay. What would be the most important data point that you take into consideration when you measure academic success?
I think the high school graduation
High school
rate is one of the most
graduation rate, okay.
important data points.
Would you know what?
I wouldn't say it's the only data point, but I would say it's one of the
The
most
most
important.
important data point, high school graduation. Okay, so is there a ratio of instructional?
I'm not sure, is this a policy question?
Yeah, we're in policy. Do you have a policy question?
Well, I did want to make a comment on the comment you made regarding the values of diverse workforce. It's actually unlawful to discriminate based on values. It's coming back to the second, sorry, it was on the second page, so that's really essential to keep in mind because workforce diversity, the district will strive to recruit and retain a highly qualified, diverse, and inclusive workforce that recognizes and values the differences among people. And then, Ms. Brooks, if I'm not mistaken, you commented that you want values that fit the values of the district.
Yes, that's the overarching philosophy is that the teachers and staff and administrators we hire, we would like them to embrace our mission and vision and portrait of a graduate. That's what we mean in terms of values.
Okay, so it's not the values of the person you're looking at.
No.
No,
Okay,
no, of course
no, I
not.
misunderstood that. Okay.
Yes, you did. No, it's the philosophy of the school district.
So, but just to make sure you're not looking to employ people whose values fit that philosophy, is that right?
We're looking to employ people
And
who
we assess,
embrace the whole child, who embrace respecting children, who embrace the diversity, who embrace everything that we're trying to achieve through equity, diversity, and inclusivity. That's what it's about.
I would advise you to consult discrimination law a little bit more in detail in terms of that, because within the DEI framework that is very specific here. You may be in conflict with that law.
May I? Sure. So I think if you take a look at our portrait of graduate, which is on the wall here, right? The goal is to be more inclusive, and I suspect that you're taking the word values and thinking about it as like a moral, religious, or political judgment, and that's definitely not what's meant here, right? So when Port Washington says it has a whole child approach to education, what that means to me, and I think this is actually a little the problem I was talking about, the kumbaya nature of the diversity, equity, and inclusion. It doesn't mean that we throw out all data and we look to see if children look happy in the classroom, right? It's not what that means. We're very data-driven. We have professionals who are literally doing nothing but assessing all the data that is available to us, which is not just one set of state test scores. it's tons of data at every level, crunched in all kinds of ways. To me, if you have a district who has a whole child approach to education, it means that the data isn't the entire picture. That the goal isn't to have children be lockstep, put under pressure to get the highest score on whatever test. It means that we understand that we are also raising children to be educated, well-rounded individuals, and that what you're preparing for them for in the world is very different than it used to be 50 years ago. And so we also want them to have these less numerically driven skills, creativity, problem solving. We're looking at all of it together.
But this discussion.
The data is very important. It's
Do
taken
you
into
think
account.
that cutting RR and AS teachers and SUSEs would be helpful for that?
I mean,
In this discussion?
I think you're inserting apples and oranges together. I think because of the position that our budget is in, and also looking at an assessment of what our school needs, our administration is recommending that we not continue additional positions. Do I personally?
Reducing the tax cap and cutting the most important one-on-one help that kids with disability behind a meeting can get with incredible teachers. That's exactly what we're proposing to do. And it's,
I think this is a budget question though.
it's not a budget question.
It
It's a student success comment, is what I have. But I've taken up enough of your time, so thank you so much.
So I guess we're adjourned. Our next meeting is May 17th.
Correct.
Yes? Hard to believe it's gonna be May, but it will be. Right? So we'll see everybody then. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Sorry for doing this. Oh, just curious, does DEI? Oh, you can. This work, the DEI work at the district?
I'm sure it does. I'm sure the professionals about it.
Yeah, they